I once traveled 1,480 miles from my little town in Arkansas to a completely foreign land. I wasn't even in the United States anymore. I had left the country. All around me, people were speaking different languages and doing things and eating things I never would have imagined. This place is Canada. My name is Carter, and this is the first episode of Perspectives. This series will be very different from our usual squabbles. Here, we won't debate, but we will take turns giving one-sided sagas. It might be a piece of advice, raw, unedited thoughts, or just our point of view, hence the name Perspectives. In this case, it's a story, a real story, my story. Being a young and skinny Caucasian boy is a little intimidating when you are strolling about a poor, eerie, Canadian, Aboriginal Indian reservation. It is especially unnerving when you are attempting to spread news about a god who is generally unwelcome by the majority of the Indian citizens. I arrive at the Canadian church with a mission. My mission is to relay the story of Jesus Christ to the Aboriginal people of Canada living in this nearby Indian reservation. The Indian chief is one of the only believers in the tribe, and he has suggested we come down and hand out Bibles. Before we start our journey to the sadly run-down and dangerous Indian reservation, the pastor initiates the buddy system. Everyone must travel with their elected buddy at all times. The man I'm buddied up with, I had met a day earlier. His name is George. George is a friendly man, old, skinny, and very tall. His pale skin has hardly ever seen the sun. His neat Canadian accent and his kind smile did not undermine his awkward tendency to flatulate with every stride he took. George and I load up our car with boxes of Bibles and head towards the reservation. The car is instantly filled with nothing but my own thoughts of anxiety and nervousness to share my beliefs with an unfamiliar people group. The rest of the trip is silent, except for the occasional fly fart from George. We finally arrive, and George decides to park in the heart of the Aboriginal community, the center of town. George and I start walking, each of us inefficiently carrying a large box of Bibles. We don't get more than 25 feet from the car before two young, poverty-stricken Indian girls run up to me with confused expressions, and they ask what I'm doing. I explain that we're handing out Bibles, and I ask them if they have ever heard of a man named Jesus. They said they had, and that's when I received my first biblical question. Nervousness and fear shot through my intensified body as she asked, "Was Jesus born in the New Testament or the Old Testament?" There's an easy answer to that question, especially for someone who has grown up in the church. But I could not calm the agonizing storm inside me. I could not bear to give a wrong answer about something of such high importance. I carefully answered the girl's simple question. He was born in the New Testament. And off they race, Bibles in hand. It's getting late in the day. We're almost out of Bibles, and I am baffled by the number of walking farts George has discharged. We decide to give out our last two Bibles to a couple of large, buff, muscular Indian construction workers, each carrying a 12-inch knife used to cut through metal plates. We cross the street, headed towards them, and my conscience is telling me that this is a bad idea. Talking to a couple of armed and muscular Indian men about a subject that is generally unwanted is definitely not a good idea. They're building a metal shed, but one of them seems to be on break. George waves, toots, and begins talking to the first man. The man sets down his construction tools and starts asking questions. He is genuinely intrigued about what we have to say. But at that moment, George and I realize these two aboriginals are completely and utterly opposites. Not even stopping his work, the second man furiously yells, "That's just a bunch of bogus." We talked to the first Indian man for over an hour, breaking every 5 minutes, as the second Indian man yells crude and inappropriate slander towards us and our beliefs. Suddenly, as if a fuse has finally reached its end, the bitter Indian man stops his work, grabs his foot-long knife, and has it inches from my throat in a matter of seconds. Every muscle in my body froze as a plethora of scenarios rushed through my head. The only weapons I had to defend myself with were my fists and the Bible I grasped firmly in my hand, and the former would not do much against the large Indian construction worker and his sharp, grim, handheld companion. With a crazy look in his eye and every intention to do harm, he says, "If you don't get off my property in 10 seconds, I'm going to show you what an angry Indian looks like." He takes the knife away from my throat and shoves me away. George leaves his Bible with the first man, and we make our way safely across the street, in shock. The angry Indian man pipes up once more from across the road and yells, "You white people aren't even supposed to be on this reservation. We put signs up and you white people keep taking them down." George and I walk a couple of blocks to the Indian chief's office to explain the incident. The chief says he will take care of the situation and says we're welcome on the reservation no matter what. The chief tells us this: some people have a hard time adjusting. I happily give him my last Bible, and George and I start our journey back to the church. Halfway through the car ride, George asks if I'm all right. I reply positively, yet still replaying the incident in my head. Then George interrupts my thoughts, first with a fart, then with, "Well, look, now you have a story to tell. Threatened by an Indian man, eh?" That concludes our first episode of Perspectives. Obviously, they're going to be a lot shorter than our usual squabbles. Let us know if you like it, and let us know if you want us to do more. Feel free to support us on Patreon so we can continue our squabbling journey. You can also like us and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to us and listen to us on iTunes, YouTube, and SoundCloud. I'm Carter, and this was Perspectives.